Hello. So, I promised I wanted to talk to you guys about this stuff I found at the Tonga volcano. Well, I didn't find this stuff at the Tonga volcano. I found some stuff in the data from the Tonga volcano, and this one gets weird too because this is also has to do with like the Krakatoa um, thing and volcano, and I just wanted to briefly jump in here and show you how our 28 degrees and our 57 degrees just fit and sit so nice in there. Here's a image release this I got from the Iris earthquake peoples, and it's showing the movement of the different types of meters and to what degree and at what time when the Tonga blast happened, and then I overlaid, of course, some radians on top, little radian sticker. So pay attention to this one down here, right? The detections per 6 hours, right? And we know like that some of this has to do with meter placement, but some of it has to do with exponential and the amount of wave happening in a circular pattern of growth, and how we fall within these parameters. So the green one is the 28 degrees that I layered on top, and the red one underneath is the 57 degrees, and they all sit so nicely in this. So then let me see if I can zoom right up here to this section. If you're looking in the upper right hand corner here, you can see that I took the radians, I turned them red, and I put them over this graph to show this spiraling of the release, and how the opposite points, reflective points, right, are interacting. So we know that when the blast hit, it hit in the wave and it all came out, and we could actually measure it in that sense. But man, I mean, look at this 28 degrees in this frequency here. I just want you to check that out. 28 degrees in this frequency here. When you go down here, we see the repetition of the 28 degrees here, and we wind up with our schmancy analemma right here on the seismograph data from this volcano. And these are important integers. Here we go. So this is from May 22nd, and I was mapping these because we have 6.3 here. And what's interesting is the fewer the rings, the greater the charge, like the greater the concentration of the charge. Okay, so on the 26th, we got a 7.2 here in Bolivia, we got a 6.2 out here off the coast, and then over here we had a 6.4 a little closer to Australia, which would put it approximately here. And there you go. And so I was like, well, what's happening? Do they fit? Well, yeah, of course they do. Here we go. Boop, boop. You see what I'm saying? They fit. Seems arbitrary. It's not. It's not. And it's not always there. But when it is there, see, we have on the 26th, the day of those 3 earthquakes, we have 1. And the inner solar system lines up within the 1. And then we get the larger system. This is Earth in the center of this one, right? And we're able to break down all of these on one side of the sky here, including the moon. Moon is super important factor in our reaction to it, to the movements that are happening here. And so as you can see, it kind of looks like gears on a watch, and how they just kind of interact with one another. And Here's the surface of the sun on the 25th. And again, we have this spatial parameter that it fits within, a radian, because that's the significance for the release of charge, right? And they seem random, but they're not. They're not at all. And the ancients knew that. I learned this from them. All right, so I want to talk to you a little bit more about these circles and the way that refraction and reflection are a little bit different. And so when these circles are playing off of each other, there's an incident angle where the light is kind of bent. Now, it's not just light, it's all kinds of stuff, right? It's everything within the spectrum, and it behaves at these, like, right, you wind up with this like primary beam, and then it hits it, and then it's reflected out, right? But sometimes it is refracted out, which means it's shifted. So we go from here's a good one, but let's see. We go from like a reflection, but it's slightly turned, right? And we wind up with an analemma, and then there's a force. There's a force that's pushed down on these until they interact with each other, and it shows up on the surface of the sun. What I'm trying to hit home and what I'm trying to explain to the best of my ability in layman's terms, because I was told to kind of keep it simple, is that here's a great one. My computer will behave itself. I guess not. I guess we're just not cooperating today. But there's a behavioral issue happening when we try to see where these circles will line up, how they will interact with each other, what's going to happen next, and what will they do. We have to first figure out where the primary beam is coming from, and then what's reflecting off of it, and then did it hit a surface that displaced and bent the light. And that's usually the case. That's usually what's happening here. These are the Debye powder diffractions. So to keep this simple. But the way that they behave, they come out in these rings, right? And the rings are the density layers. And then how are those density layers interacting with the surfaces and with each other? And that's exactly what's happening. Here. There's a certain amount of reflection and a certain amount of refraction, and they're just all behaving. Now I say this to express a point, and the point is that what happens within the sphere is everything is happening within the sphere. Okay, everything is happening within the heliosphere, and it isn't necessarily the sun having an effect on the planets and the planets having an effect. It's basically like this internal mechanism, right? The sun and the planets are interacting and having conversations with each other, and that conversation is affected by an outside force. But for all intents and purposes, this is today's. It's an inside job. Everything is dependent on one another. The surface of the sun is dependent on what the planets are doing, and the planets are doing is dependent on what's happening with each other, and they're all kind of behaving this way, and what we're doing is dependent on what's happening on an outside field. And each of these planets is ruled by a space in that outside field, which is indicative of the type of behavior, which is an archetype. And that's how it all kind of translates through. So when we're talking about our solar system, we really need to be looking at it as an entire whole, and then each of these parts, and what do those parts do for that greater mechanism. And it shows, because we're able to say, well, if the planets are moving in this alignment, then there's going to be a reflection of that on the surface of the sun, and it's going to interact. But it isn't a single interaction; it's a whole system thing. So if we're just going to say, well, Saturn is effective, well, kind of. Saturn is effective, but Saturn is also being affected. So if we go look at that system and see how that system is behaving according to where it's at in the greater whole of the wheel, then we'll know how it's going to talk to the other planets and the kind of mood they're in depending on where they're at in the wheel. And then all of those things kind of recirculate around and recharge each other, including us. But we have a lot to do here because we're the oscillating resonator. So as a resonator, it's our job to keep everything in harmony, right? And that's why Gaia is the mother. And Gaia's always been here. If you look back in the ancient myths, Gaia was one of the very first. Gaia and Uranus are actually the parents of all of them. So if we think about it in that respect, like if we actually took the lineage and went backwards, Uranus would have been our first sun, like the first star. And then, he was a father to Kronos, and then Kronos gobbled up all of his children except for Zeus, Jupiter here, and then Zeus became the star, and then Zeus's kid, right? Apollo and Mars are now the rulers of the solar system because Mars is the god of war, so he's kind of the sentry, he's kind of the guard, which makes sense in the larger perspective of the thing. So there's a reason why they all have an analogous human personality, a archetype. There's a reason they all live in the houses that they live in, and it is affective, solar affective, geo affective, personally effective to us. And we're a part of that, and so we are going to respond and react to it. And it does come down on molecular level, on a quantum level, because as within, so without, as above, so below, everything is a reflection or a refraction of that initial light. And so it causes behaviors and reactions. So that's what's been going on. So anyway, so 3 giant earthquakes makes sense because we have this analemma happening in our solar system at the moment, at that moment. And coming up here in June, we've got some other interesting things going on. Why is my computer? It's just slow. But I was trying to show you that I did make the, why is it not going? I did make the prediction charts for June, and I put them out on electric weather. And I was going to do a separate one that was also the earthquakes, but I decided not to do that. Here we go. Okay, it's not. So, here's the days for the solar weather for June, and I don't know, I mean, I'm feeling a little bit more confident, and I will post the earthquake stuff again. I had originally started with the earthquake stuff, and that was confusing to people. And people keep telling me they really want to understand what I'm talking about, and I'm trying to simplify it and put it into terms that everybody can understand because it's important. It's really, really important. I mean, imagine if we knew that if we could predict exactly where the Earth was going to express at the moment, or the sun was going to express at the moment. Imagine what that would do for humanity. And if we could understand how better to gauge it according to what we were seeing just from the ground with simple tools and simple mechanisms, we could save lives, we could change the world, we could harness energy, we could communicate, we could do all kinds of stuff. And it starts basically here. It starts with these little bits. So that's just this shape. I'm like beating this shape home for you guys because it's extremely important, and it's the one that's going to show you that this works. And when we get it in its entirety and we understand it at its whole, we can start moving on to different shapes. And there's some people I'd like to talk to about those shapes. So if there's somebody that wants to talk to me about those shapes, or this shape, or any other thing, just message me. We'll see what we could do. I'm not into arguing. I'm not into fighting. I'm into conversation and having a good time and understanding things. So leave your aggression at home if that's what you're after. The door is not open. But if you're just down for conversation, you just want to hang out and actually try to figure something out in a constructive and beneficial way, yes, please, let's do that. So anyway, I'm gonna go since my computer here is just like not. Oh, there it goes. Now that I see I'm gonna leave, it's gonna go. So anyway, so remember these shapes, and you remember how they work, and then we can start getting into some more of this nitty gritty because I feel like I'm repeating myself. But until we can start to see that there is a point here, and that this particular shape is a release of charge, and by tracking this release of charge, we are able to understand what's going on. And it is straight up energy, electricity, light, and refraction. And that's what it is. And it's really simple. Really, really simple. Alright? I'll talk to you guys soon. Keep your eye out on the June stuff. And have a great day.